Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer. Welcome to Wasteland Talks, my weekly talk show where I talk about whatever the hell I want. And this week, doing a special top 3 video with my friend Aaron, who's back to talk some more books. Aaron, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Shane.
And this is fun because this is the third one that we did. Because I know we did sci-fi books, we did some. I think the last one was like just fiction,
Yeah.
and now we're doing some nonfiction. Um, but I know we each picked out 3 books. Do you have any quick honorable mentions?
I I don't think so. You know what? They're probably going to come out as I talk about the
That's
books.
fine.
I'll look
Uh,
so.
I just told Aaron I specifically came up with some honorable mentions because I don't want people to just think that all I do is movie related. Because spoiler alert, these 3 nonfiction books that I picked are movie related. But it's funny because I'm probably the outlier of millennials, and I'm not like super into true crime stuff. But
I'm not, I'm with you, so don't worry.
Devil in the White City
Oh, that's a good one.
is such a great one. That H.H. Holmes book is crazy. And it makes me sad because Martin Scorsese was supposed to turn into a movie. And then it
Oh,
got moved to Hulu, and Leonardo DiCaprio was going to make it with Keanu Reeves, which I thought that was interesting. And then it's just dead in the water, apparently. So nobody's making it at the moment. I'm like, well, they'll circle back to it. Somebody will get the rights to it.
right?
Um, there's that. I love music. I've read a lot of music biopics. I've read a lot of music books. One in particular, I love Rush and Philosophy. You know, those series of books that it's like something and philosophy, and it digs into like the deeper meanings of like a topic. And I love the band Rush, and they're
Mhm.
my favorite band because I'm a nerd and
Mhm.
love progressive rock music. And it's a whole entire book about all the philosophy that's gone into their music, which that was cool. And I have a book written by my favorite baseball player, Randy Johnson, on pitching. And I remember buying that when I was in, I think, late elementary school, early middle school, because I wanted to be a pitcher. So
Oh,
I was trying to learn how to pitch, and it never worked out. Um, the
please, you
only
learn.
the only time I ever got a chance to potentially be a pitcher, I broke my ankle before, like the week before I was supposed to pitch in 5th grade. And then I never got the opportunity again. I mostly just played first base when I played baseball for 6 years, which I was like the biggest kid on the team. So generally you throw them at first base because they don't have to move a lot. But I did a really good job at playing first base, if I say so myself. I miss baseball. So, and I know you can appreciate that as an athlete of
Yeah.
like, so, but Aaron, what's your first book on your list?
Oh, okay. So I had to look through my bookcase earlier this week, but I think going down there, I feel like mine are like, I just feel like you think nonfiction and you think like biographies or something. So
Yeah.
none of mine are really that.
Okay.
Um, my first one was Love People Use Things. So it's written by the minimalists, Joshua Fields Milburn and Nicholas Nicodemus.
Mhm.
Um, and there's just I got really into minimalism in my 20s, just like scarcity, trying to save money, all these things. So I was like, oh, just it'll be like a lifestyle choice. I'll choose minimalism. But it was really, really cool concept and maybe philosophy to find and try. And they did this like special, I think this is like maybe their second or third book. And it was like a release and it was during COVID and they did like a video interview about it. And it was really, really cool. I mean, I would say like their message kind of stays pretty consistent. So I mean, like if you've read one, you might have read them all. But for me, I like reading those books every now and then just to like reinforce and remind yourself of like what's important and what you should really be focusing on. And the premise is all pretty much in the title. They're very focused on, relationships and people and, finding philosophies and less stuff that doesn't have a purpose.
That's interesting. And I think that becomes more and more important as we get into our 30s and as we
Mhm.
get older, and just like I don't have time for all of this stuff. You just collect so much stuff over the course of your life, and you're just like, where do I even have space for this? And speaking as a millennial, will we have a house that can fit all that crap in it? Maybe not. But we're gonna try.
It's so hard, right? Because when you have the space, there's a really big hole in our like society and as people to fill that space, right? So it's
Yeah.
really hard. Yeah, it's why I keep reinforcing it to myself.
It's funny because that reminded me a little bit of Marie Kondo, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And the reason that she sticks out to me because my mom's name's Marie Kondo. And every time somebody brings her up, I'm like, my mom? Uh, but my wife is a big fan of Marie Kondo and is just like, does this bring you joy? Then why keep it?
Yes.
And it's understandable. And it's an interesting way to really think about that, especially when you're trying to downsize and keep to, because, like, as you're probably experiencing as you're preparing for a move, when you
Well,
move, that's the moment you really realize how much crap that you have. And you're just like, where'd I get all this?
I was literally just on the phone with my boyfriend being like, I was clearing out all the stuff and I don't want to get rid of it, but I also am realizing I really haven't pulled it out since I moved into this place a year
Mm.
ago. So I'm just like, why? Just why? But yeah, it's when you move, you just find like you can think you're doing really well, like I always think I'm doing really well, and then I go to move and I'm like, you're not doing as well as you think.
Well, and you brought up an interesting point too of like, if you have something that you haven't touched since the last time you moved, that probably says something, right? And that's interesting. What was the name of the book again?
Love people use things.
Love People Use Things. I'll have to check that out. I'm gonna just add it to my ever-growing Amazon book to get
Yes.
list.
And it's their new, like I feel like it's their new tagline. I listen to their podcast sometimes too. And so it's love people use things because the opposite never works. So it's like, oh, okay, it makes a little bit more sense.
Love things and use people. Yeah.
Doesn't always work out.
Yeah. You're probably doing life wrong if you're doing that, or you wind up like Ebenezer Scrooge and have nobody in your life.
Right.
So, and that's not a fun life to have. Just look at A Christmas Carol, turn it all around. But so, like I alluded to, all of my picks are movie related.
I can't wait.
A couple of these are relatively recent reads that I got, and they also have a little bit of like some sentimental value too. So this was actually a gift for my 30th birthday from my buddy Jim, as it says in the front cover. Is Martin Scorsese A Journey? And this is such a fascinating like dive into like it isn't quite a straightforward biography about director Martin Scorsese, but it's it takes a deep dive into each of his films. And it also gave me a lot of interesting perspective on him because on one of my other shows, Welcome to the Wasteland, I went through literally every single one of his films, like week to week to week, because that's literally what I do on that show is I take a director and do that. And I he was somebody who I just didn't understand when I was younger. Like I watched Raging Bull in high school in a film class and hated it. I'm like, this movie's literally just two Italian men yelling and hitting each other for 2 hours, and screaming the F word. Which technically it is, but there's so much more to it. But this book let me also get a greater, deeper understanding because, like, he's now one of the filmmakers that really speaks to me
Yeah.
because he's an Italian American, raised Roman Catholic, and there's a lot that goes along with that. And there's a lot of being, huh?
Sensing some similarities.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like I started watching his films and having read this book, and I'm just like, I feel seen in a lot of this. And like the book's really fascinating. There's a lot of interesting breakdowns and analyses about his films. And it goes from his very early life up until Cape Fear, because I think this was written in the early 90s. So like Cape Fear came out around like 92, 93. So I wonder if there's a sequel. It goes with the rest of his films since then, because he's still been making films ever since, because he's been making films since the 60s.
Yeah, there's
And he
many.
still is.
Hmm.
Because like I'm so damn excited about Killers of the Flower Moon, which also I've heard amazing things about. It's also a nonfiction book. My wife Jess is reading it, and
Okay.
it's great. It's about murderers of the Osage people because white men were trying to steal all their oil, and it
Natural.
was naturally, and it was one of like the biggest early FBI cases. So like it was a really fast, it's a fascinating story. I want to read it. I'm very excited for the film. But so basically that book kind of really spoke to me, and it gave me a lot more appreciation for his films. So I'd recommend it if you're somebody who like loves film, obviously. I think it's definitely a book to check out.
Speaks to you. Yeah, it
Mm,
sounds really good. I mean, and he's just an incredible, director. It just, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people would really enjoy that.
yeah. The I think the most interesting section was the Last Temptation of Christ, because he was going to be a priest. At one
Oh,
point, he was going to become a priest. And then he decided
wow.
not to go through with it and became a filmmaker instead. So it's a very interesting experience. But Aaron, what's your next one?
So okay, so my next one is I'm gonna lean into stereotypes a little bit and say that I think the females may like this one a little bit better, but um I had kept hearing about Untamed by Glennon Doyle. It was like on the New York Times bestselling list, which I will say personally, I try not to buy into because I've been burned by the New York Times bestselling list a couple of times. So
How dare you, New York Times bestseller list?
everything's on it. But so I kept seeing it and I kept hearing about it. And so I was like, all right, I'll bite the bullet. I'll pick up a copy. If I hate it, I'll donate it, whatever. Loved it. Loved it. I think I read it in like 2 days. It's like short kind of, it's like, it's weird, right? It's not short stories or poems, but it's almost like musings. So I don't
Mhm.
know how to describe that, but it's just so good. It's about, she was like a Christian and got divorced from her husband and married Abby Wambach. So that it's just like her whole kind of story from there, which is it's just really, really good. And her kids and raising up her kids and being
Mhm.
like a highly sensitive, highly empathetic person. So it's just it's quick read, it's a feel good, it just kind of hits on all the points. So
Awesome. I have also, well, basically, I just add all the books that we talk about on here
I
to my to get list.
appreciate
It sounds like
that.
an interesting. It sounds like an interesting story of like somebody trying to process through, very common, very human things, and you know, you just basically an inspiring story about somebody, pushing through adversity and being able to accomplish things that day-to-day people do. Like that could speak so deeply to people. And
Right.
because it makes it a lot easier to obviously like sympathize and empathize with somebody. It's like I have been through such things, and like obviously, like what you mentioned, like women might find this more relatable and stuff like that. It's like because some of these experiences are
Yeah.
uniquely a female perspective and experience, but like especially if it's something that's so well written and you know might be a good exercise to be able to, take a step back, read it, and empathize and understand.
Yeah.
So I
All the but and she I mean it just and it's also to your point, I love that because I think anyone could read it and find something
mhm.
in it. But yeah, it was just very, very good. Yeah.
Well, I will definitely check it out. Also, I just noticed, so like I have my Amazon app up as we're going through this. They have Goodreads ratings on Amazon now
Really? I
for
had no idea
books.
those were did. Okay.
Amazon has access to everything.
That's
Everything. And the
basic
thing
stuff.
is, I do want to preface, if I can find a book at a store, I will get it there. It's just Amazon's convenient and makes it easier for me to make a wish list.
It's so true. There's some books I can't find at the store, so I don't. But it's funny. I went to a couple weeks ago. I ended up buying like 3 books that weren't even on my list. But I went into all these independent local bookstores, and I was like,
Mm.
"Or so."
I feel like I have to balance this out. So I go to Second Time Books, which is
Oh,
literally a couple of minutes from my house.
I love that though, and it's a
It's
second.
in Rancocas Woods Village of Shops, and it's such a great little small bookstore. So shameless plugs all around here. I get a lot of Stephen King books there. That's where I got The Stand, which I'm presently reading all 1,200 pages of it. It
Oh,
take
God.
me a while, but now this next one was also a gift, a birthday gift. And sorry, Jim, no offense, but like this is from a gift from somebody who means very, very much to me. Is from my wife. So this was a birthday gift. She knows me so well. I am since I was a little kid. I've been such a big fan of Mel Brooks
Mhm.
and like Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, Spaceballs, Robin Hood Men in Tights, and all of his films. And this man is like 97 years old and is still alive and wrote an autobiography called
All about me.
Mel Brooks, All About Me,
I freaking
My
love
Remarkable Life in Show Business. And I have to tell you, so you can tell sometimes when like an autobiography might not be written by the person.
it. Yeah.
There's no mistaking this. This is written by Mel Brooks because his voice and his comedy are so distinct. Like I busted out laughing by the end of like the first couple pages.
Oh my God. Don't you love when a book sucks you in like that though? And you're just like,
Yes,
hooked, you got
I
me.
couldn't put this down, and like this isn't like a short book,
Mm-mm.
but
Nope.
like because like it's like 500 pages, and I just burnt through this, and it's very linear in terms of structure and going through his life, but I learned so much about it, and because at the time of writing this book, he is 95 years old. Um,
Insane.
he is so talented too. He's so funny, and like what made me laugh so hard, he starts the book with this story about his mom just basically shutting him down as a kid because he's just being a kid, and she makes, I forget what the exact joke is, and I won't ruin in case people want to check this out. It's so funny and it's so interesting because like obviously I know his films, but like I learned a lot about his life and
Yeah.
his experience as a Jewish kid growing up, his experiences of really struggling and trying to find a place in comedy, um, like working the Catskills, which like I knew about that because Dirty Dancing, and
Yes.
also because love Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And
I thought
yes, which that's the thing, all the Jewish families from New York would go to the Catskills,
I
and
knew it.
that's where he started was doing comedy shows and music shows at the Catskills for people.
That's amazing.
So, and just I laughed so much reading this book. And also it was really inspiring like his capacity for love because like he was married to actress Anne Bancroft for like decades, and that they were like the love of each other's lives, and I'm just like, and you don't see that a ton in
Especially
Hollywood.
not good. Yeah.
It's so beautiful and sweet. His son Max, they have such a great relationship. His son Max wrote World War Z, that
Oh,
book, Max Brooks. Yeah, that's his son. Which I remember finding that out and being like, "You're kidding me." And it's like, no, that's true. And it's just such a great read. It's such a breezy read too, because like it's just so funny reading through the whole thing. But it's probably my favorite biography that I've ever read. I'm just like, this is making me laugh. I feel love here. This is hilarious. I learned a lot, and it's somebody that I have a lot of respect and admiration for. So definitely worth. And it's all about him.
I
Which, like,
love that.
you can't even get through the title without laughing.
Right. Well, and also like I just feel like you said, right, you really love him as an actor. And I feel
Mhm.
like when you read a biography and you can hear about their life, like it just reinforces or makes you even like look at their acting in a different light. And it can
Mhm.
be, oh, it's just so eye-opening and it feels so good. So I don't know that I'll have to write that one down. It sounds like an amazing one.
Oh, it's such a fun read. And even like I would even say it's a fun read, even if you're not super into movies and stuff like that, because he's just such an entertaining and funny person. I've almost picked it, but like my wife also got me a kind of it's an unconventional biography from Steve Martin, and
Oh,
basically it's his whole story in little comic form. And
that's, I love this different.
it's so many great jokes, like so many great jokes, but such a weird little thing. And you know, it's something special when you could just be sitting and reading a book and awkwardly laughing to yourself when nobody else is around, or in front of a bunch of people while you're sitting there reading. So there you go.
Sign
But
of a good book.
absolutely. But Aaron, what was your last one?
Okay, so my last one was Into Thin Air by John Krakauer. I don't know. But I can't remember if Into Thin Air was my first read of his or if Under the Banner of Sun was. But anyway, I've read almost all of his books now,
Mhm.
and they're very, very good. And Into Thin Air is about the 1996 Mount Everest climb where people like eight climbers were killed because there was a storm, and he actually climbed it. So it's like a firsthand account of what
Mhm.
happened. They knew, and yeah, it was just it's very, very fascinating. I've read actually a couple Mount Everest stories, and I really, really like them. But
Mhm.
I'm also reinforces to me that I never want to do that.
I was going to ask you. It's like, is this something you aspire to do, Aaron?
No, it is.
Okay.
But it's like it's such a wild experience to me that like it's very, very interesting to read about. And yeah, it's just I feel like he's such a good writer, and he can really
Mhm.
just tell it from a good standpoint. I feel like he's like a bit of an investigative writer, except this one in particular is from his own narrative and his own point of view. And yeah, it's just it was great. It's something that I feel like not a lot of people experience too, right? Like not a lot of people are going to climb Mount Everest, so it's
Yeah.
just it really gives you that and a look into that experience and what it takes and what they have to go through. And I mean, we all know it's a lot, but it gets into the details, so it's fascinating.
As somebody who won't even climb a ladder, I certainly will not be climbing Mount Everest. Um,
I will not do together.
there you go. Well, and I think books like this are really cool too because it is an experience that the vast majority of human beings, like the vast majority, will never experience something like that. And especially if it's from like his account of it, being able to like kind of vicariously live this adventuring through somebody else's experiences and not have to put your life on the line. Uh, because yes, perfect. Because I jokingly call myself a hobbit. I do not like to venture from my hobbit hole often. I will do it for very special people in my life, but like I don't do it often. But like this is not something like I would be able to bring myself to do. But being able to hear about it from somebody else sounds like a really exciting experience. And like I've seen a couple of films. Like there was a film Everest that came out, which
Yeah.
I don't know if it's about this. It might be about the same climb with like that first with climb with all those people that is like, let me tell you, that movie didn't end very nicely for a lot of
No,
people.
no, and it was an infamous season for Everest because I think at to date at that point was like the most deaths that they had seen on the mountain. It was just a lot of storms, a lot of climbs that just, total disarray. But and also just to note on your earlier point, right? Isn't that the whole point of reading books? Like we get to read
Yeah.
this book to experience in a very different way, but like have an experience or a look into something you otherwise wouldn't. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it kind of hits that same feeling of like, I remember that documentary Free Solo from Nat Geo that came out a few years ago, and I'm
Oh,
like, I could not watch it because I'm just like, I'm okay. But like maybe someday I'll feel brave enough to actually put it on. But like those are things that like, oh, I'm trying to remember. It was because I watch so many movies and so many documentaries that like, and they make documentaries about basically anything. And I remember watching a couple about like these like extreme skiers and stuff like that. And my God, the camera work and everything was so good because you were like right up there on the mountain with them. I'm just like, I
how's
I'm
yeah.
done. Goodbye.
I'm all set. But it's oh shoot, what did you say earlier that I was gonna comment on? Oh shoot, I've lost my train of thought.
Well, I just kept going on and
Oh, I got it. I'm
okay.
sorry. Go back to Free Solo for a second. You know what I did really appreciate about that movie as well. As to your point, you're like, no, don't think I'd do that. And I'm the same. I did appreciate that they put a segment or a section there, not to spoil it for anybody, but spoiler alert. Like they, scanned his brain, right? And said like his amygdala was different. Like his fear response was so much lower than any like an average person. And I'm like, I appreciate that because that also makes sense.
Yeah, mine's probably bigger than most people. I'm a big baby. I get scared very easily. It's just like, but it's like I said before, I legitimately have trouble going up ladders. Like I don't do well with heights, but it sounds like a fascinating story too, because like what's one of the most daring things you could possibly do as a human being? There's probably a handful of things that you can think of, and climbing Mount Everest is one of them.
It's
So live the dream through this very safe and appropriate book. Um, and now this last one it is a different kind of pick because like the last two were more biographies. So I find myself reading a lot of books on special interests. Like I'll find myself reading a lot more on special interests, like nonfiction books than fiction books at certain points. And like I have a lot of interests and hobbies and stuff like that. So it's pretty cool being able to find books to do that. And this one in particular, if you're somebody who's always wanted to kind of like branch out and check out new movies or expand like your taste in movies, I feel like this is like the easiest way to possibly do that. And they have new editions of this every so often. It's 1001 movies you should see before you die. And basically, this is legitimately a walk through like film history of this has films from like I'm trying to remember when this particular edition was published, so we'll find that out in a second. But this has films from like 1902 all the way up until because I bought this book like a while ago. I think the most recent book in here and film in here is let's see 2007. So like they've definitely had additions, more additions to this, and like they'll add new films, swap out some films and stuff like that. But like they literally have a checklist in the
yeah.
front of the book. So like if that's something like you've always wanted to do, and also to shamelessly plug something that I just wrote for one of the websites that I wrote a whole entire article for Guy at the Movies .com about how to expand your horizons when it comes to film. And I mentioned this book in it and a couple other ones that I've read that are really awesome collections of movies that like this is something that can help you because I know I appreciate structure a lot
Yeah.
with things And I know not everybody has the time or the drive to like come up with an expanded watch list or something like that. But like this book is literally a built-in watch list for you if that's something like you want to venture into and expand your horizons when it comes to film. And I know from experience, a lot of the early films from like the first couple of decades of film, they're on YouTube. Like they're free use. You can find them. I watch a lot of films on YouTube because of some of my other projects that I do, but I think it's a cool book to, and it isn't just like, hey, here's a movie. It gives you backstory on all the films and stuff, so you'd have that kind of context going into it too. I think the last films that they have in there is like There Will Be Blood and Borat, and because Borat made the cut
Oh my God.
because it is legitimately a hilarious movie. But yeah, so all of you out there listening who also love movies along with loving books, it's a really interesting read. And there's a whole bunch of books like that. I have one, I think it's Hollowell's Film Encyclopedia, which is a whole bunch of films to check out. Leonard Maltin, who's a really big film critic, he has books of like these are like his complete guide to film and films to check out. So just throwing that out there if that's something anybody's interested in doing.
A good encyclopedia.
More or less it is basically encyclopedia film, so it's pretty cool.
Sounds like.
It's obviously going to be a long read. As you can see, this is a thick book.
You could put it into a game though too, right? Open it to a random page if you're looking for a movie and that's the one you watch.
There you go. You could do that instead of what I do, which is using a random number generator corresponding with my Excel documents that I have. Because that
You're
is what, Aaron?
you're advanced.
Or I'm obsessed with Excel and numbers, which makes sense for the other things that I do with my life that are not movie related or book related. So
This is why we're friends.
this is why we're friends. But Aaron, thank you so much for coming on. I have a couple new books to check out, so I appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me back. This was super fun.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.